Started. Good morning, wonderful third grade people. Today is Monday, December the 14th, and we are here together for math. After our Google Meet, you're going to have a Google Slides activity for your activity in the classroom today. So you're going to have to read all directions and be patient with the procedure in there. Sometimes when we do a Google Slides activity, it gets kind of weird. But for the math that we're doing today, you need to be able to move stuff around and almost touch it. So Google Slide is the easiest way to do that. After that, you have to get your green light on reflex, and then you have some other math options to take you up until 11 o'clock at the end of our math block today. Okay, today and tomorrow for math, we're going to talk about a strategy called a helper fact. A helper fact is a fact that's close to the fact you have to answer to help you answer it quicker. We're working on our math fluency. Hang on one second. I think we have a video problem. All right, sorry about that. We had a technology issue, and I think we're good to go. If not, I'm just going to talk really fast and get into things that we need, and we'll take care of that after this. Helper facts are strategies that we use when we are multiplying. As third graders, we're just learning our multiplication facts, and sometimes we need some help. We don't know all the facts at once, so we use something called a helper fact to get a fact that we already know to get to the answer quicker. So today we're going to do something called adding a group. And tomorrow we're going to do something called subtracting a group. And I know that sounds really confusing because we're talking about multiplication and then the strategy is called adding and subtracting, but I think it's going to make sense when we get started. On the left, it says adding a group, and the example says, I need to know what 6 times 7 is. I don't know what 6 times 7 is, but I do know what 5 times 7 is, and 5 groups of 7 is 35. So I'm just going to add an extra group of 7 things because I have 5 things and I need to get 7 things. So they drew an array. You can't see it. They drew an array showing 5 times 7. So the top above the black line is 35 baseballs. And then they want to get from 5 to 6. So they added another group of 7 things underneath the line. So they had 35 from the helper fact plus this new row of 7 that they added to give us 42 to prove that 6 times 7 is 42, and that is the correct answer. Tomorrow we're going to talk about subtracting a group, which does the same thing but backwards. We're going to start by watching a video of a third grade teacher drawing on his board and showing us how to do helper facts. I'm going to probably talk over him to add more information. But the way that we're doing NTI, it's easier to watch somebody else do the drawing since I can't do that. So we're going to hang in there. We're going to listen carefully to this third grade teacher, and we're going to be patient if I have to talk over him. And if the video starts to lag, hang in there with us, and I will send it out at the end. So he's going to tell you that the learning target for this activity is that I can use helper facts to solve multiplication facts I do not know. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's get started, and I'm here. Just hear the video.
All right, class, let's get rolling right away with lesson 3-11. For those students in the loft, we know that we're going to first start by looking at our learning target. And today we are trying to use helper facts to solve multiplication facts that I do not have memorized. And we're going to do that by adding a group. So this is on page 90. You're going to follow along on page 90, and you're going to do this exactly the way that I'm doing it. So I want you to draw it out. If you need to pause the video to stay caught up, then please do so.
All right, so we're going to let him talk. He's going to show us the procedure for adding a group to multiply. We're just going to hang in there and listen to what we have to do. He's going to read you the question now. It says, sketch a picture to show 2 rows of jars with 7 jars in each row to figure out how many jars they are. So the multiplication equation is 2 times 7, which is a fact we probably know, but we're just going to take a look and see what the procedure is. All right, hang in there.
So let's look at the number 1 on page 70 or page 90. Sketch a picture to show 2 rows of jars with 7 jars in each row. how many jars are there in all. So let's first sketch that picture. So we've got 2 rows of jars. I'm going to let each row rest on a line. So 2 rows with 7 jars. So I'm going to draw my 7 jars. 1, 2, 3, 4.
So he starts by drawing a picture or drawing an array, and that's one of the strategies that we use to answer a multiplication fact or any math strategy that we do.
Okay, and this equals a jar.
I think my sound went out, so I'm going to
Okay,
talk
so
over
now
him
I
again.
have one
I'm
row.
sorry
I
if I
need to
repeat
have 2.
myself.
So 2 rows. I'm just going to duplicate this first row.
He's starting by drawing a picture.
All right, so now let's take a moment and add our next row in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So our multiplication number model, we have 2 rows times 7 jars in each row equal 14. I'm going to make sure I include my units. Now take a look, though, at our next part of the problem. It says to use a colored pencil to add another row of jars to show 3 rows of 7 jars in each row. So let's add our next row of jars. So move this over for a moment. We're going to add our jars here. 1, 2.
Okay, so he starts
3,
with the fact
4,
that he knows 2 rows of 7
5,
jars. 2 times 7 is 14. 6, and then it says
7.
add another
So
row to have 3.
Next row of jars. Let's go back to our next step of our problems. It says I added one group of how many jars? And we added one group of 7 jars. So we're going to write a number model to describe our new picture, which will look something like this. So we've had 2 times 7, as you can see here. 2 times 7 equals 14. So we're going to continue to use that number model. So we'll write that there. We had 2 times 7 equals 14. That was visible within this first part here. I'll circle it in bright green. This first part was 2 times 7, and that equals 14. If we look to our next part, we then added one more group of 7. So this became an addition to our number model. So let's record our number model this way. We had 2 times 7 equals 14. And then we did 14 plus these 7 jars here equals 21. And then it gets to our next part of our question. How did knowing 2 times 7 help you figure out 3 times 7? And I could say something like, well, I know 2 times 7 equals 14. So I added one more group of 7 onto my answer, 14. My new number model is 14 plus 7 equals 21. So 3 times 7 equals 21. That'd be one way of writing it. You don't need to write all of that down. I just wanted to model for you what explaining it would look like.
So what he did, he knew that he needed to figure out what 3 times 7 was, and he didn't know what to do. So he used a helper fact. He used 2 times 7 because that's an easier fact for him to solve. He drew the array to show you what 2 groups of 7 things looks like. He knew that it was 14, but he needed to add an extra group to what he had to figure out what was missing. So he has 2 times 7, and he needed to add another row. So he had to add another group of 7. 2 plus one more row is 3 times 7. So he has the 14 plus 7 more, gives him 21. and 3 times 7 equals 21. This sounds really confusing, but I know it's going to make a lot more sense when we go into our Google slide activity and actually get to work. So it says Monday 12-14 math, add a group. It says complete the Google Slides activity, follow the directions to do both slides, and then turn in. There are 2 slides in today's activity. Your job is to complete both of them. So slide number 1, you're doing exactly what he did in the video. It says move the blue jars, here are the blue jars, to show 2 rows of 7 jars in each row. How many jars are there in all? So in Google Slides, you click on what needs to be moved and wait for that blue line to go around it, and then drag it over. So I've got 1, 2, 3, yours is going to be neater than mine, 4, 5, 6, 7 in row number 1, and then row number 2. Click and drag. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And then it says write your equation. 2 rows of 7 things equals 14. How many jars are there in all? 14. Then it says use the green jars to add another row of 7. Write your number model to describe your new picture. So I have to use the green ones now to add another row. So click on green and drag. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now you've moved your jars. Now you have 3 groups of 7 things, and you can do it 2 ways. You can do 14 plus 7, or you can count up the jars since you have the model. So 14 times 7, or not 14 times 7, 14 plus 7. 3 times 7 is equal to 21. How did you know how did knowing 2 times 7 help you figure out 3 times 7? Type here. So I'm going to click where it says type here, and I'm going to do just what the teacher in the video did. I added a group of jars to model another row. 14 jars plus 7 more jars equals 3 groups of 7 jars, or 21 total jars. Now I typed too much, so it kind of fell off. So I'm going to choose to change the color so you can see it. And just for our video, I'm going to make our answer a little bit smaller so you can see what it says. And then I'm going to fix all those terrible typos that I did. And now my answer says, I added a group of jars to model another row, because I had 2 rows and I added another. 14 that I already had, plus 7 more jars is equal to 3 groups of 7 jars, or 21 total jars. So that's slide number 1. You're going to move the jars over. And if you haven't done today's math yet, this might move for you. I'm not sure. And then slide number 2. Suppose you don't know the answer to 6 times 3. Well, the helper fact is 5 times 3. Move the elves to show how you can use 5 times 3 to help you figure out 6 times 3. So I need 5 groups of 3 things. So you're going to grab an elf, wait until it turns blue, and drag it. Here's row number 1. Here's row number 2, row number 3, 4, and 5. And you'll fill in your elves. You're probably going to have to go over the question because it's not enough space. And then it says add a 6th row. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change your answer. You do not know the row 3 times 6. So the helper fact is 3 times 5. And this only matters. Now remember last week we talked about the commutative property of multiplication. And that means I can change the numbers in any order when I'm multiplying and prove my work. But for the purpose of our slide, I don't have room for 6 groups of 3 things, but I do have room for 3 groups of 6 things. So here's 1 row, here's 2 rows, here's another row, and then I'm going to have to add a 6th thing to the end. So then you're going to figure out what 6 times 3 is and type it in this box after you draw your beautiful array. On the top, there's a button that says turn in or share or something, I think. Click on that button. If not, if you go back to where the Google Classroom activity is, where you clicked on your name in the right, it should let you turn it in. Please take your time with today's activity, not because it's difficult, but because the procedure in the Google slide is tough for us sometimes. If you need help, send me a message and I'll get back to you ASAP. I think you'll find it very easy then once you start moving the stuff over, just to answer those questions by adding a group to multiply. So it's the end of math. Check mark for your Google Meets. You're going to go and do today's activity and then get on Reflex.